Welcome to New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Berletic. Joining me, as always, is Angelo, Giuliano, and also pretty often now, Rashid from the Red Pill Diaries. If you look in the video description below after the live stream, I will put all of his contact information where you can find and follow all of his excellent work. Rashid, I saw your live stream. Well, I saw the replay of the live stream this week. It was excellent. Good job. And not just because you featured me. It was really good. So thank you for that. And yes, and Angelo is very active, especially on X. Follow him there, and that will be in the video description below as well. And today we're talking about this. I would say theater or circus, this drama in the White House between U.S. President Donald Trump, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian. I think he's still the president, Vladimir Zelensky. And what I think what we want to talk about today is analysis of what happened rather than an emotional reaction to what happened. Because so many people are reacting emotionally. It's very emotionally satisfying after 3 years watching President Zelensky be artificially built up into something everyone knows he's not. And for someone to now tear him down, it's so satisfying. So many people cannot resist the temptation to just indulge in it. And that, I think, is the whole purpose of all of this. I was talking to Scott of Calibrated, I think it was like yesterday, and we were talking about do either one of you know why Zelensky was in Washington in the first place? There's a supposed mineral deal. But Alexander Mercouris did a great job breaking down this so-called mineral deal. And what he revealed is it's not even really a deal. It's not even like a memorandum of understanding. It's more like kind of a prop. If you asked me, it seems more like a prop. And there was nothing resolved, and there was nothing that was going to be signed of any meaning in Washington. So why did he travel all the way to Washington? And I'm not saying this was staged. Everyone got handed a script and they rehearsed. But I think to a certain extent, they kind of thought, well, Zelensky's been acting up. He's mouthy, and we could just get him to mouth off, and we could, verbal beatdown, give him a verbal beatdown, and we can make this split more compelling for the Russians, more compelling for the MAGA crowd in America, more compelling to the Europeans who are now enthusiastically ready to sacrifice their social programs for arms. Well, Angelo, just give me your initial take, and then we'll go to Rashid.
Absolutely. I think this was a trap for Zelensky, and what they wanted to do was actually to shift the blame, was always shift blame. So they're shifting the blame to who? To Biden. They make Mike Biden look stupid. And actually there was a trap. They really, they started actually making joke of Zelensky from the first minute. And actually he was there. Actually, it's not a coincidence that J.D. Vance was there. Usually this is president to president, but the whole team was there. You had all the journalists. So this was a whole setup. And what Trump is achieving here is, number one, it's not a US defeat. It's Biden's defeat. And basically it's an easy way out. And so basically they're shifting the blames, but at the same time they're giving these problems to the EU. And now, you know what people forgot? They forgot that actually the loser of this war ultimately is the US, who initiated from the coup 2014, already 2004, then 2014, who initiated this was the US. And who followed was NATO and the EU, and then you had, they had the puppet. So basically now they completely forgot that this is, first of all, another US humiliation. Because of this whole show, including the mineral deal, he made it look to his MAGA crowd that's a win. It's a win for the US. We are going to make money out of this. And we are showing that, you see, they need to respect us because we are a great nation and so on. It was a whole show, and people forgot the essential. This is another US humiliation. It's another US defeat. And Trump needed an easy way out. Why does he want to drop Ukraine really as quickly as possible? Because otherwise it would be seen as his defeat. There's ego behind this. So it's just dropping the whole thing. So people just forget that ultimately this is a US defeat.
Also, please do not forget that U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth laid out the entire plan publicly in front of the entire world on TV. There's a division of labor that needs to be allocated. The U.S. is pivoting to China, and we can talk about that later because there's been developments there. And Europe is supposed to step up. And let me just, before we get to Rashid, and Rashid, I would like your take on this. Look at what has happened in the aftermath. White House clash boosts pressure on Europe to aid Ukraine without US, which was the whole plan Secretary Hegseth laid out in Brussels about a week or two ago. The whole plan is to get Europe to double, he literally said, double down on Ukraine, expand arms production, which the US is doing on their side of the Atlantic as well, freeze the conflict with peacekeepers inside Ukraine, and then try again when the conditions are more favorable for the U.S. and its proxies. Am I missing something, Rashid? Am I missing anything here?
I can offer another take on it. I think it's political theatrics. And when there's a crime committed, the investigator always look for motive, opportunity, and who benefits the most. And when we look at the situation, all of this, I would say, was somewhat staged. It gives Zelensky clout back home with the Banderites, and that gives him a little negotiating room, and he can say, well, listen, the United States is pulling out, so maybe we have to talk to Russia, and at the same time it frees the United States hand, because now the United States can say, hey, we've done everything we can, and look how he disrespected us, and they can wash their hands and then focus on their main objective, which is to make war with Iran and eventually pivot to Asia to try to prevent China's rise, which is their main goal. And it also makes the EU a little more relevant, because it was becoming irrelevant, because now they have to step to the forefront like a lot of them wanted to, the war hawks wanted to do. And also, when we look at this, again, I point to something. If Trump truly felt the way that he was talking, and if Vance truly felt the way that he was talking, then why haven't they stopped the funding? You cut the funding, you cut his mouth, you cut his negotiating capability. We still see that there's funding for the military, the Ukrainian military. We still see that there's funding for the retirees and all of the pension plans, and the majority of that comes from the United States. So if they felt offended, just cut the money. If not, if they didn't cut the money, then that means that they were not as offended as they pretend to be. Follow the money. There's an old saying, follow the money. And right now, they say, well, maybe we'll stop the funding for weapons sales or whatever like this. It is about the money. You're still supporting the private sector of Ukraine. So evidently you are not as hurt or butthurt about what Zelensky did. And do you believe, I have to say this, do you believe that a person that is pretty much totally financially dependent on the United States and totally dependent militarily would have the gall to go in unscripted now into the White House with the vice president and the US president and out-talk the president and show disrespect to the president and the vice president? This gives Trump and his team out from Ukraine. They can say, look what he did. We can just cut him away, or we can do this. I think all of this was staged because, again, if you're a detective, when you're looking at a crime, motive, opportunity, and who benefits, we see that the Trump team benefits the most. And back home in Ukraine, Zelensky benefits because he can tell his audience, look how I stood up to them. I even got on the news media in the United States and said I refuse to apologize. This gives him political capital at home. It gives the EU political capital on advancing the Ukraine fight without the United States. And it gives Trump and his team the political capital that they need to do what they have been wanting to do. And that's to break publicly with Ukraine to focus on Iran and focus on China.
Absolutely. And we have Danny Haifang waiting in the wings before we drop him into the middle of all of this. I just wanted to, well, some people have been talking about in the comment section, why is Starlink still accessible to the Ukrainians? How about this one right here? Trump may halt all military aid to Ukraine following Oval Office clash. Why hasn't he already done that? Right? I mean, it doesn't add up. And one point I want to make before we bring Danny in on all of this, I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard someone say, if you're walking down the street and there's a dog barking at you at the end of a leash, do you get on all fours and bark back at the dog, or do you talk to the person holding the leash? In this case, as you pointed out, Rashid, the yapping dog here is Zelensky. The leash goes from Zelensky back into Trump and J.D. Vance's hands. So they're on all fours barking at their own dog. This is an American proxy that would not exist without constant U.S. support and the support the U.S. demands Europe provide Ukraine. They would disappear over the course of a week without that support. So just think about that if you try to ascertain whether or not this was staged or whether this is drama or a real break. And with that, let's welcome Danny. Hello, Danny. We're just going to fire right at you. What is your take on the White House drama?
Well, I did a reaction video yesterday where I gave my take, and it definitely hits on essentially all of the points that you've already made. What Angelo said about this being a setup, a trap, I think is 100% true. Now, in terms of it being staged, Zelensky is a 3-bit actor. So the performance he was giving felt genuine in the sense that I believe he came into the Oval Office that day already knowing that he was going to get chewed out and already understand, I mean, think about it. You just said it, Brian. The United States controls and owns the Ukrainian regime. So it's quite clear that he was going into this knowing that there was going to be a lot of hell to pay, especially on the public relations front. And I believe that this performance, and I do believe it was a performance by Donald Trump, was all about as Rashid said, it's about outs, I call them opportunities though, because I think that's how Donald Trump is seeing this, as an opportunity to continue this process of shifting the blame for the collapse of the Ukrainian proxy war onto Ukraine, onto Zelensky, onto Europe, so that however, we know that when the United States engages in so-called diplomacy, what it's actually doing is it's trying to reorient itself so that it's in a better position to follow and pursue the agenda that it has, which is full spectrum dominance. So the best way to do that at this time is not to sit as a new U.S. president and allow Russia to completely and utterly destroy Ukraine and win militarily. That would be actually a disaster for the Trump administration. It would bring about all kinds of political humiliation. So Donald Trump is doing his best to distance himself from the entire thing, because I don't think Trump himself, a lot of people are grand strategist, master plan. No, I actually don't believe he has a grand strategy or a master plan. I see this as if Donald Trump and his administration get as much distance from Ukraine as possible, then all of the options are on the table, and whatever limitations the United States has, the United States isn't going to get all that it wants from Russia. It might get very little from what it wants. It might get nothing from what it wants from Russia in any kind of so-called negotiations. So any kind of distance that Trump can put into place in preparation for these long, drawn out, which I believe will be drawn out talks with Russia. You said it, Brian. Why hasn't the aid stopped already? Well, it's because the U.S. administration, Trump, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. I think whoever was going to be in there knew that this was going to be a drawn out process. Then there's all these opportunities for the United States to suddenly now it's no longer, oh, for as long as it takes, give Ukraine everything it wants, and we can push and push and push and push against Russia. No, now it's, well, not my fault. This wasn't my problem. I didn't do this. This was a catastrophe of the Biden administration. This is a catastrophe of you, Zelensky, you, the dog. You've been a very bad, bad, bad dog. Europe, you've been very, 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 very bad dogs too. So now you all have to share and handle the burden. Should, and I believe the United States' administration believes this, should this whole so-called diplomacy, peace talks, all of that fall through. It could very well fall through. I don't believe the Trump administration thinks that it can get everything it wants. So at the end of the day, this seems to be more of a shift, a reorientation of the United States' posture. Posture meaning not necessarily policy, but how the United States looks to the wider world vis-a-vis the Ukraine conflict. How does it portray itself? How does it situate itself within a disaster and a catastrophe that it made? It is, as Angelo said, it's the humiliation, the defeat, it lays at the feet of the United States. Anything the Trump administration can do right now to redirect people's attention away from that, I think, is the name of the game for as long as it takes to engage in this process with Russia, which, as we'll talk about, has its own kind of aims as well.
Yes, absolutely. So there's many different things taking place, Danny. You're talking about the humiliation the U.S. would suffer. It goes beyond that. Even if you listen to Republicans, Democrats, neocons, they're all saying the same thing in the Senate, in the House of Representatives. If Ukraine collapses, nobody is going to believe the U.S. is going. No one's going to want to be the next U.S. proxy to be Ukrainianized. This person from the comment section is talking about Trump and the javelin. So did anyone catch that? I'm sure you all caught that. He's demanding President Zelensky thank the U.S. and thank President Trump specifically for sending javelin anti-tank missiles, which, as I've said a million times, this was the final red line that convinced Russia. This is a security threat. This is an existential threat. If we allow them to militarize, arm, train, build out a Ukrainian army, basically a NATOized Ukrainian army with the size of Ukraine's population at that time, this is going to run away and we're not going to be able to do anything about it in the future. We have to act now. So it was almost the last red line that convinced Russia to launch the special military operation in the first place. So think about that demand that he thanks President Trump and the US for weapons that were used to precipitate and perpetuate a proxy war that has burned Ukraine to the ground while he's there in Washington to sign a mineral deal to allow the US to cart off anything that is in ash at this time. Just think about what that means. I see a lot of Trump supporters talking about the mineral deal like Trump is dunking on Zelensky and it's so satisfying to watch. But what are we actually talking about? We're talking about the U.S. robbing Ukraine after committing arson of Ukraine. It's unreal. And
Brian,
this was,
yes. Can I add just one thing? I mean, just the logic, because people, they tend to forget. I mean, pure logic. Do you think just for a second that if Russia was losing, which would be impossible, we all know that, but if Russia was losing, do you think just for a second that Trump would ask for peace? He's actually seeking peace because they're losing. What would you ask for? Especially those guys. There's $75 trillion of natural resources. This is the richest country on earth. So, I mean, again, this is one of the logics. And I would like, I don't know if maybe we could touch upon, because there's a lot of confusion within the whole community, because there's a lot of changes. See, MAGA, there are changes. And where are the changes? People think that, well, because we have signs of, the end of globalism, meaning, this is multipolarity. And actually, there's lots of misunderstanding. And I think, I'll try to formulate the way I see it, but actually I don't have the full answer, because this is a new project, which is hard to get the full picture. Even though when you go into the program of Trump, it's very clearly stated what they want to do. But people, they tend to be kind of confused, because now you see they want to get out of NATO. They talk about they're going against the EU, this institution which was created by the US. They're going against the globalist agenda, also in terms of identity. Actually homogenizing the whole culture. Making a whole culture. Now they want to. It's more like conservative. So the way I see it, I would try to formulate that as being a globalist agenda, going from a globalist agenda with this whole woke politics, which is included, and also social engineering, the construction of the human being, and so on, with U.S. leadership, into U.S.-centric imperialism led by U.S. oligarch. And that's how I would put it, but this is like really, I oversimplify it there. But I think people, they tend to forget that, this is still imperialism. And this might actually end up to be even more brutal, because now Trump will have no hesitation to go against his own allies, and it's very brutal. It's going to be, when you look at the South America, they are, if they can, topple Venezuela's government, it is going to be extremely brutal. So what is your take on this one? Because I see a lot of people that are extremely confused, and actually a lot of people are jumping to the MAGA cult because of that, because they see, they hate globalists, and I do personally hate globalists. I think it's a huge problem. But what are we entering with MAGA? What is the plan? Is it, and we need to clarify that. And I think the program of Trump says it all.
I would say it was always imperialism. It was always brutal, murderous, exploitative imperialism, but it was always in the velvet glove of globalism. The velvet glove is coming off, and all you're going to get now is a face full of steel gauntlet across your face. That is the transition that is taking place, because the U.S. cannot afford to play games, perform theatrics like that on such a large scale with U.S. aid and everything. They're cutting away. People have said the U.S. is trying to get down to fighting weight, because they see China advancing, not just advancing quickly, but accelerating constantly. I was listening to a 3-hour-long hearing in Congress about different ways to contain China, and is a room of imperialists, warmongers, Democrats and Republicans, foaming at the mouth, hyperventilating, because they cannot believe that no matter what they try to do, China just continues to rise, accelerate, and outperform the U.S. So this is what is pacing all of this. And this is what's driving the desperation and the need to do unprecedented things. And we will see more to come.
I just want to pop in about what Angelo said in related to this so-called minerals deal. We have to be honest. What I see, Angelo, and what you're saying, Brian, too, is the transition more just like, U.S. politics is all about spectacle. And actually, ideologically, a lot of the differences between the two so-called entities called political parties that are controlled by the same corporate masters, they are literally all about spectacle, because however they posture themselves, however they frame themselves, oftentimes the policies are if not very similar, just completely entirely the same. So that is, I think, what is happening here. And you can see this with the so-called minerals deal. First of all, what has the Ukrainian economy been subjected to, especially since 2014, by the United States and by the U.S.-controlled International Monetary Fund? A crippling, debt-saddled privatization nightmare, which is literally just being written in a document called a minerals deal, which Alexander McCurse is exactly right. It's so vague because it's just writing down and showing people this is what we want to do to the Ukrainian economy. We want to control it, and we're going to do it more fairly. We're going to posture ourselves as now the generous, benevolent big daddy, as opposed to that secretive, conniving Biden administration that was just messing everything up. No. You can even see in the document, they talk about corruption. This is how we foster private investment. No, it's not about that. It's about taking control of Ukraine's resources post-collapse, because Ukraine is weaker than it's ever been, and it's going to be far weaker than it's ever been once the disaster and the complete and total defeat of Ukraine is cemented, because any kind of negotiations that are going to take place is going to include Russia taking whatever territory it's already gained. So that means Ukraine is going to be this little, you've talked about this, Brian, this little Western Ukrainian zone that is completely and totally dominated by the United States. And that's what the Trump administration wants to do. So it's going to be incredibly brutal. It's going to be incredibly disastrous for Ukraine. And the Trump administration's foreign policy is going to be incredibly brutal and disastrous anywhere it goes, because all of this posturing is simply that. It's going to be posturing because the United States is all about spectacle politically. Empire is not going away. There's not a peacemaker here. We are seeing, I believe, you said, Brian, almost like cutting the fat to prepare for war with China and other adversaries. That's what is happening. A retreat, I said this yesterday, a retreat before the advance. A lot of actually U.S. administrations have done this. The Obama administration kind of did it, although they were surging in Afghanistan and Iraq during that period. But there was a political retreat, 150%, before a massive advance into 3, 4, 5 new wars. Now, will the Trump administration start new wars? It's hard to say, because the new wars is hard to do when you're literally at war with the entire world all of the time. And prior administrations, including yourself, have played a big part of that. So, but the aggression, that's going to continue. And that minerals deal, it's a completely worthless piece of paper that just shows what the United States has already been doing to Ukraine and is planning to do once the collapse and the defeat is finally set into stone.
I want to add a little bit.
Yes, go ahead, Rashid.
What's different this time is that the empire is under a tremendous debt burden. It has used up most of its geopolitical and political capital globally. So desperation is coming. And so what we see, as Angelo was asking, when he said, what is going on? People jumping on the MAGA bandwagon. Well, what's going on is that the empire is collapsing. It's collapsing inwardly and it's collapsing outwardly. And the world is watching it. So it's when the empire collapsed, and they start looking inwardly, eating itself up. And anything that gets in its way, it makes war on it, because it wants to try to re-cement itself as the preeminent or predominant power, even as its power is waning. So when we're looking at her trying to transition to Asia, we also have to look at the whole spectrum of it. And we see that when America is in trouble, she needs rest, rearmament, and recalibration. These are the 3 R's of empire. And we're seeing the empire trying to recalibrate. They thought that they could bring Russia to yield, and now they're realizing that this is a no-go. That doesn't mean that they have given up on bringing Russia to yield. That means that what they're trying to do is pacify the situation right now, because their most pressing threat now is to wage war against Iran and China. And the reason I say Iran and China is because Iran is the underbelly of both Russia and China. And if they can take Iran, they can strategically destabilize Russia and China at a lesser cost. So Iran is that's why they took away Lebanon. That's why they took away Syria, so that they can use that as a transit to attack Iran, so that they can get their objective is Russia and China. Now, there was something else said about the desperation of the empire, a little bit of the desperation of the empire. Well, empires become more desperate as everything that they used to dominate is removed from them. Look, China is outstripping them in everything, not just China, but the whole of Asia. And a lot of people don't want to come to grips with this. The reason China is a threat to the United States is because it is a non-white, non-Western nation. That is one of the main things, and they cannot see a nation like that becoming the preeminent power, because they feel that China may do to them what they've done to everybody else. That is what's pressing them. And I believe that the stripping of the fat is not because they want to. is because it is a necessity now, because they don't have the financial, the geopolitical, or the political capital anymore. So that's why you saw the theatrics on TV to try to build up capital around the world to say,
told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your faith. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a